So I had a thought. I've been playing a lot of old school games, particularly running a lot of shadowdark. And I've been thinking about what really happens at the table during play when I'm running shadowdark and how my players interact with different situations. And so I've been thinking about what it is that makes old school interesting and how can we lean into that, quantify that. And so let me break down what I think is this secret of old school play. It has to do with a couple of things, but I think it boils down to this idea. The fun of old school role play is in creative problem solving. It's in this idea of creating or crafting solutions that may or may not lead to more shenanigans. And I'm going to break down some of the things that I think enrich or support that style of play. And two of those ideas I've had were this idea of inventory mattering and limited ability or powers, I guess. I'm going to use the term powers really loosely here to mean a wide range of things, but it's essentially a power is anything that cuts off the need for creative or critical thinking. So something that's just a button you press and it solves the problem, right? Whether that's a fireball or casting fly on an entire group of people, anything that just says this problem is no longer an issue for us and we move on. There's no role play. And so this is part of what I think makes old school style play significant, because in a lot of ways, abilities kind of circumvent the need to role play. And I'm not saying abilities are bad. I think there's kind of like a sweet spot in old school play for abilities. And this is a personal feeling of mine from, trying to write and design a game. But I think you can have about like 1 to 3 abilities that support an identity for a role and don't completely, get rid of the use of creative thinking. And we can go into that in another video because that's probably a whole nother thought. But so yeah, I'm sitting there, we're playing a game, and I'm thinking about the characters' inventories, right? And whether the system you're thinking of uses weight or maybe inventory slots, there's a finite limit to that inventory. And so when situations arise where the players and their characters are at a disadvantage or they don't want to take things head on because, there's that sense of lethality in a lot of old school games, which again supports this style of play, then they have to look at their inventory or think of ways to shift the paradigm to their advantage, right? And sometimes that's in their inventory. Sometimes it's not on their character sheet at all. Sometimes they just think about the situation they're in and they either try to, haggle with a character or use the environment to their advantage and things like that. But a lot of times there are these little tools that they have that, someone will ask well, what if I take my rope on one end of this drawbridge and I take an iron spike and then we can get across before this goblin army comes and then I cut the rope when we get to the other side. Problem solved through creative use of items. There's also this sort of negotiation bit to a lot of it, right? It's not like a debate, but a proffering of ideas to the game master or even to the rest of the party and say hey, can I use your item for this over here, and maybe we can combine these two things and make a trap or something like that. But anyways, so I think inventory is one of them, and inventory matters more when you have less powers, right? When you have less of those buttons that you can just press and say, you know what, it's time for me to pull the ripcord on this power and just use it and solve the problem, and now we'll move on to the next scene. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and one of the things that came to mind were how the more players you have at your table, the more these abilities are going to matter, right? And it also creates this camaraderie between the players and their characters. Because now, if you only have like one or two special abilities, those abilities really matter in the moments when you need them. Like, if you do have a wizard who can cast two spells, right? Suddenly, the moment that they use one of those two spells is critically important. And I feel like there's more collaborative play in that sense, and less of like all right, I'm going to go in and do my combo and spam all my buttons and, to hell with what the rest of the party is doing kind of thing. And more of a like conversation like, hey, if I use my charm person on this guy over here, then you can go in and sneak around and try to knock out the other goblin, and we'll get rid of the patrol before they can, raise the alarm, that sort of thing. So yeah, I've been trying to encourage this style of play in my games, and one way that I do that is I give lots of like limited use items. Whether they're mundane or magical, I like to give these really niche, like hyper specific use items. And I'll just give you an example of something that happened in one of our games. The players came across this troll. There was this big ritual on an island, and everyone, the cult was trying to summon this troll. For some reason or another, they had like a sacrifice. It was very like King Kong style. And the players came across the clearing. They were hiding. Anyways, chaos lets loose. They did some things that made everything go sideways, which was a lot of fun. But then on top of that, the troll kind of came after one of the players, and he had a mushroom that he's had for a few sessions. And so when I described this mushroom, a mushroom folk gave it to him, and all he said was that the last time someone ate it, their flesh became like stone and they fell through the floor. And so I kept it really vague and open-ended. But it basically, in my mind, this was like a meld, flesh to stone or meld stone, whatever edition the old spell was. So he asked, okay, if I want to climb up on this troll and try to cram this mushroom down its throat and see what happens. And it became this really dramatic moment that eventually led to the troll not knowing what was happening. He succeeded, crammed the mushroom in. And so I had to adjudicate in the moment. I decided, like he heard, this troll's flesh turned stony like and fell through the earth. And he even asked, he's like, is it kind of like stony, or would you say it's stony around where this troll is standing? And so basically, long story long, he dealt with the troll by just having this random one-use kind of item in his back pocket. And I do want to make the distinction that I don't think this is just pressing a button. He had to come up with this idea, implement it, and it had to still succeed. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just like I cast invisibility, I sneak in, I grab the thing, and I leave. There was a dialogue. It was a back and forth. It was using something he had in a creative means in order to solve the problem. Outside the box thinking. Anyway, this is getting a little rambly, but I think these two ideas of, limited abilities and limited use items, or, making your inventory and equipment matter, really support this idea of creative problem solving. So maybe that isn't what makes old school to you. Maybe it is just lethality, which I do think lethality supports these ideas, because lethality can create instant stakes, right? You're a whole lot less likely to just say, oh, I run in and I try to stab everyone, if you know that you only have 4 hit points. But anyways, that is definitely a subject for another video. Lethality could be its own sort of conversation. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What really maybe is the essence of what supports creative problem solving in your games, do you think that there's a sweet spot for like number of abilities? And just on that note, and I always think about those multiplied by the number of people in the party. Or do you think that, having powers has nothing to do with creative problem solving? It's really something else that is sort of a pillar that supports that style of play. All right, that's it for today. Let me know below if you're enjoying this kind of stuff. I've had some mixed comments and results so far. I mean, mostly positive, but some folks definitely have strong opinions about these things. I don't really. I come to these with an open mind more than like a solution usually. And just before we go, I do want to add that a buddy of mine from the Discord, Lon, is making an adventure for Old School Essentials, and specifically in the Dolmen Wood setting. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I'll put a link down below. It's not sponsored or anything. He just asked if I would shout it out, so I wanted to do so. Thank you guys for watching. Please do comment. I enjoy the back and forth, and it also lets me walk away with fresh ideas so that I can take those things and implement them to better support the ideas that we're talking about here. Oh, and before I forget, Crit, an awesome free online con, is coming up. So if you want to try a bunch of different games with a bunch of awesome game masters, then, you can do it from home and it's free. And if you want to try my game, 7 Delving Sins, I'm going to be running a few adventures and there's still seats open. So come check it out. All right. I guess the tagline for these videos is, a jack of all trades, a master of none, is oftentimes better than a master of one. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.